In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this baby cardigan sweater, and we're also going to make matching booties and a matching hat to go with the cardigan. And I'm going to do the cardigan in 4 parts. In part 1, we'll learn how to make the yoke of the sweater, but before we make the yoke, we'll do a gauge swatch. That way you can determine if you need to adjust the size crochet hook that you use to make the sweater. And then part 2 will be the body of the sweater. And then in part 3 we'll make the sleeves. And then in part 4 we'll add the trim and the finishing touches, such as the little buttons for the sweater. Then after that I'll show you how to make the matching booties and the matching hat to go. The first few rows of the yoke will start off with single crochets. But then we are going to change the type of stitches that we do. If you don't recognize this stitch, this is called the crunch stitch, and it makes a beautiful texture, and I really like how it looks. And I will also have a tutorial on how to do just the crunch stitch, and I'll post that around the same time that I post the body of the cardigan before we do part 2, so that way you can see in more detail how to work the crunch stitch. That way you can learn how to do the crunch stitch if you haven't done it before, and get familiar with how to do that stitch before you start the second part of the sweater for the body of the sweater in part 2. So if you'd like to learn how to make this sweater today, please join me in this tutorial and we'll get started on making a gauge swatch and the yoke of the sweater. The first thing that we're going to want to do is to make a gauge swatch. I'm going to do a 4" by 4" swatch. That way you can check your gauge to make any adjustments to the crochet hook size that I'm going to use to make this cardigan. Because what happens is, if you do not test your gauge to make adjustments for the correct size crochet hook, then what will happen is the size might come out too small or too big. So that's why it's really important that whenever you're making clothing, I always recommend that you do make a gauge swatch first before you begin. So let me go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. To make the sweater, we're actually going to use 2 different size crochet hooks. The smallest crochet hook will be a size G or 7 4.5mm crochet hook. The larger crochet hook size that we're also going to use in this project will be a size I or 9 5.50mm crochet hook. So we will use both sizes. I'm going to go ahead and do a gauge swatch using the smaller size crochet hook. We are going to be using Bernat Baby Sport yarn. It's a number 3 lightweight yarn, and it is a 100% acrylic yarn. The color that we're going to use is called Baby Blue. We're also going to use the Baby Bernat Sport yarn in the color of white for the trim of the sweater. So to make the little swatch so we can gauge this crochet hook that you should use, because you want to go ahead to get the correct size, you want to be able to count how many stitches you have across and how many stitches tall to get a 4" by 4" gauge swatch. That way, if you need to use a smaller or larger crochet hook, I'll explain to you how you can determine if you need to change to a different crochet hook than the one I'm using in this tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and just start off by making a basic square. You're just going to do a slip knot, and let's go ahead and chain 20 chains. And then skip the first chain closest to your hook, and then do a single crochet into the second chain from the hook, and then 1 single crochet in every single stitch across. Just continue to work rows of single crochet until it is approximately 4 inches long, or even a little bit longer. So just continue to work until it's about 4 inches long, or a little bit longer is fine too. You want to have a height of at least 4 inches. That way when we measure, we can measure 4 inches across and 4 inches in height to determine what size crochet hook you should use when making the cardigan. So I'll just continue to work my rows of single crochets, and I will meet you back here when I'm done. So I went ahead and just kept continuing to crochet rows of single crochet until my work was approximately 4 inches in height. Okay, so now that you have your gauge swatch finished, now we want to measure 4 inches across and 4 inches for the height. And then we'll count how many stitches we have across that measured out to 4 inches, and then we'll measure how many rows we have for 4 inches. And that way you'll be able to tell if you should change your crochet hook to a smaller or larger crochet hook than the one that I'm using in this tutorial to make this sweater. Okay, so I'm going to measure the height, and you can block this square if you want, or just give it a stretch a little bit. Not too much, but give it a little bit of a stretch so you can kind of measure really well. Okay, so there is my 4 inches. So if I count my rows, I have 19 rows. Okay, and then I want to measure across to 4 inches, and there's 4 inches, so right after the stitch at 4 inches. So right at 4 inches, I'm going to go ahead and place this right in there so I can count how many stitches I have across. "16 stitches. So for me, my gauge to work this sweater in a 4x4 inch gauge swatch is 16 stitches across, which is 16 single crochets across and 19 rows of single crochets. So now what you want to determine, when you used this same size crochet hook, did you end up with 16 rows across and 19 rows of single crochet? If the answer is yes, then I would recommend that you use the same size crochet hook that I used in this tutorial. If you find that your swatch has less rows across and less rows for the height, then what that means is your tension is tighter than mine. So if the difference for your swatch is within a 1/4 of an inch or less difference, then I would say go ahead and use the same size crochet hook that I did. So if your swatch is larger and you have more stitches than 16 inches across, or if you have more rows than 19, then that means your tension is looser than my tension. So that means you should switch to a smaller crochet hook. So then what you want to do is maybe test, do a swatch with the next size down and see if you end up with, the same amount of stitches. So your goal is, when you switch to the different size crochet hook, that you end up with 16 stitches across and 19 stitches in height. If you end up with more than 16 stitches across and more than 19 rows, then you'll need to switch to the smaller crochet hook. The swatch smaller than mine, then that means your tension is tighter than mine, and that means you work the stitches a little bit more tightly than I do. Then that means you're going to want to switch to a larger crochet hook. So the goal is to end up with 16 inches across and 19 inches in height. So whatever size crochet hook you need to get the 16 inches across and 19 inches in height, that is the size crochet hook you should use. This is a step that you do not want to skip, especially when you're making clothing, because if you want to have the expected outcome and the correct size when you're done with your crochet project, you definitely want to always do this step. So whenever you see this in a pattern, I highly recommend that you do take the time to do the little swatch to determine your gauge. Because if you do not, then you'll end up with a garment that's too big or too small and not quite the size that you were hoping for. So I hope that helps explain how to do the gauge swatch and why you should do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the part where we start the yoke of the sweater. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make the yoke of the sweater here. And to make the yoke, we're going to use the smaller size crochet hook, the size G or 7, 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. And this is going to be done in several parts because we have the yoke and then the body and then the sleeves, and then we work on the trim and, you know, put on the little finishing touches such as the buttons. So the first part of the tutorial is going to be part 1, where we're going to learn how to make the yoke. And then part 2, we'll do the body of the sweater. And then part 3, we'll make the sleeves. And then part 4, I'll show you how to do the trim and add the finishing touches with the little buttons. The size of this baby cardigan is going to fit a newborn to 3 months. When you measure for a sweater for 0 to 3 months, measure from the armpit down to the hem here. It should be approximately 19 centimeters or approximately 7 inches. And then for the sleeve, then when you measure from the armpit to the hem of the sleeve, it should be 5.5 to 6 inches in length. So you want it to be at least 5.5 inches, but not more than 6 inches. And then in centimeters, that would be approximately 14 centimeters for the length of the sleeve from the armpit to the hem of the sleeve, about 14 centimeters. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin making the yoke of the sweater. Okay, so to make the yoke, I'm going to start off with the smaller size crochet hook, the size G7, 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. Okay, and I'm going to start off with a slip knot. I'm going to chain 55 chains. Okay, so I have my 55 chains. So for row 1, we're going to do 1 single crochet in every single chain. And we're going to begin in the second chain from the hook. So we're skipping the chain closest to the hook. So into the second chain from the hook, let's go ahead and do a single crochet. And then we'll do 1 single crochet in every single chain for this row. Okay, so I just finished row 1, and for row 1 it was 1 single crochet in every single chain. When you're done with row 1, you should have 54 single crochets. Since we started with a chain of 55, we skipped the first chain closest to the hook, so you should have 54 single crochets when you finish row 1. Okay, so for row 2, first we're going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn our work. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the first 6 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into the first 6 stitches. Into the next stitch, we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. Okay, so that was 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 12 stitches. And then we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the next stitch. So this stitch will have 3 single crochets all into the same. Okay, so that was 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And you can see where we did the 3 single crochets, it causes the work to bend, and that's exactly what we want. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 14 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into the last 14 stitches. And then we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the next stitch. So this stitch will have 3 stitches, 3 single crochets. Okay, so that was 3 single crochets into the corner, and you can see how the yoke is starting to bend at the corners. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 12 stitches. Into the next stitch, we're going to do 3 single crochets all into that stitch. And then 1 single crochet into the last 6 stitches of this row. And that completes row 2. So now you can see that it bends at the corners where we did the 3 single crochets, and you can see that these 2 parts here don't quite meet, and that's because I wanted to leave a little space for the trim of the sweater. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 and churn our work, and now we're ready to begin row 3. In the first 7 stitches, we're going to do 1 single crochet. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet in the first 7 stitches of row 2. Into the next stitch, we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 14 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into those 14 stitches. And then into the next stitch, we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 16 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into those 16 stitches, and then into the next stitch we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 14 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into those 14 stitches, and then into the next stitch we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then you should have 7 stitches remaining, and we're going to do 1 single crochet into these last 7 stitches. And that completes row 3. Okay, so we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and we're going to begin row 4. And for row 4, we're going to do 1 single crochet into the first 8 stitches. Okay, so we did 1 single crochet into the first 8 stitches, and then into this next stitch we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 16 stitches. And then into the next stitch we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 18 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into the 18 stitches, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the same stitch. So this next stitch will have 3 single crochets, and then we're going to do 1 single crochet into the next 16 stitches. Okay, so we just did 1 single crochet into those 16 stitches, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets all into the next stitch. And then you should have 8 stitches remaining, so we're going to do 1 single crochet into the last 8 stitches of this row. Okay, so that completes row 4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn our work, and then into the first stitch we're going to do a half double crochet. Now normally when you do a half double crochet at the beginning of a row, you would do a chain 2, which would be your turning chain, and you would normally count the turning chain, that chain 2, as your first half double crochet. But for this cardigan sweater, we're not going to count the turning chain as our first half double crochet. So that's why we're only going to do 1 chain and then do a half double crochet into that very first stitch. And then we want to have 9 half double crochets at the beginning of the row before the corner. So I already did 1 half double crochet, so we need 8 more. And if you've never done a half double crochet, you just do a yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and that's how you do a half double crochet. Okay, so we did 1 half double crochet into the first 9 stitches. Into the next stitch, which is the corner stitch, the very next stitch, remember in the previous row we did 3 single crochets into the same stitch? The one that's in the middle of those 3 single crochets is the next stitch. So into that stitch, we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the corner. So 2 half double crochets into the same stitch, and there's the corner. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 18 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 half double crochet into those 18 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the next stitch. And this stitch here, where we're going to do the 2 half double crochets, is the middle stitch of the 3 single crochets that we did in the corner of the previous row. So into this very next stitch, we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Okay, and there's our corner. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 20 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 half double crochet into the last 20 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the very next stitch. Okay, so that was 2 half double crochets into that stitch for the corner. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 18 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 half double crochet into 18 stitches, and then into this corner stitch, the very next stitch, we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Then you should have 9 stitches remaining, so we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the last 9 stitches of this row. Okay, so that was 1 half double crochet into the last 9 stitches of this row, and that completes row 5. Okay, and then we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and now we're ready to begin row 6. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the first 9 stitches. So we're not going to count the turning chain as the first half double crochet, so we're just chaining 1, and then we are going to do a half double crochet into that very first stitch. We're not going to skip the first stitch. And then that was 1 half double crochet, so we need to do 8 more because we want to have 9 half double crochets. 1 half double crochet into the first 9 stitches of row 6. Okay, so we have 9 half double crochets, and then into this very next stitch we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. And then into the next stitch we're also going to do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. So these last 2 stitches had 2 half double crochets each. So in the previous row, in row 5, we did 1 single crochet in the first 9 stitches. And then in row 10, we're also just doing 1 stitch into the first 9 stitches. Now it sounds like we're not increasing, but we actually are, because in row 5, in the corner, we did 1 half double crochet in each stitch. But in row 6, we are doing 2 half double crochets into the next 2 stitches. So essentially, instead of having 2 stitches in the corner like row 5, we have 4 stitches in the corner. So that's where you get that increase. So you have the 9 half double crochets, and because we have that 2, that's essentially like the 10th one, and then you have the rest of them. So that's why it almost sounds like we're not increasing, because it starts with 9 and the next row starts with, because row 5 started with 9 stitches and row 6 also started with 9 stitches, but because we have more stitches in the corner, that's where we're getting that increase. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 18 stitches. Okay, so we just did 1 half double crochet into 18 stitches, and now here we are at the corner. So we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the next 2 stitches. So this next stitch will have 2 half double crochets into the same stitch, and then this next stitch will also have 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. So there's our corner there. 2 half double crochets into 2 stitches, so that's 4 half double crochets in the corner. And then we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 20 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 half double crochet into 20 stitches, and then into the next 2 stitches we will do 2 half double crochets each. So this next stitch will have 2 half double crochets into the same stitch, and then this next stitch will also have 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Okay, there's the corner. Now we're going to do 1 half double crochet into the next 18 stitches. Okay, so we did 1 half double crochet into those 18 stitches. Now we're here at the corner again, so into the next 2 stitches we're going to do 2 half double crochets each. So this next stitch we're going to do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Into the next stitch we'll also do 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Okay, so those last 2 stitches had 2 half double crochets each. We should have 9 stitches remaining for row 6. So we're going to do 1 half double crochet in these last 9 stitches. Okay, so that was 1/2 double crochet in those last 9 stitches of row 6. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and chain 2 and turn our work. And for row 7, we're going to do 1 double crochet into the first 10 stitches. Now, normally when you do a double crochet at the beginning of a row, you would chain 3, and you would count the chain 3, which is your turning chain, as the first double crochet. We're not going to count the turning chain as the first stitch, so that's why we're only going to do 2 chains, and then we're going to do a double crochet right into that first stitch. We're not skipping the first stitch, in other words. So do 1 double crochet into the first stitch, and we want 1 double crochet into the first 10 stitches. So we already did 1, so we need 9 more. So we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next 9 stitches. Okay, so we should have 1 double crochet into the first 10 stitches. Perfect, I have 10 double crochets. Now into the next 2 stitches, we're going to do 2 double crochets each. So we're going to do 2 double crochets into this stitch, 2 double crochets into the same stitch, and then we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next stitch. So these 2 stitches in the corner, 2 double crochets each into the same stitch. So these 2 stitches in the corner had 2 double crochets each into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next 20 stitches. That's 18, 19, 20. So I just did 1 double crochet into 20 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next 2 stitches. So this next stitch is going to have 2 double crochets into the same stitch. And then we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Okay, so we just did 2 double crochets into the last 2 stitches. And then we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next 22 stitches. Okay, so that was 1 double crochet into 22 stitches, and then into the next 2 stitches we're going to do 2 double crochets each. So this next stitch will have 2 double crochets into the same stitch, and then 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Okay, so the last 2 stitches had 2 stitches each, 2 double crochets into each of the last 2 stitches, and then we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next 20 stitches. It's 18, 19, and 20. That was 1 double crochet into those 20 stitches, and then into the next 2 stitches we're going to do 2 double crochets each. So this next stitch we're going to do 2 double crochets into the same stitch, and then we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next stitch, so these last 2 stitches had 2 stitches each, 2 double crochets in the last 2 stitches, and then you should have 10 stitches remaining for this row 7. We're going to do 1 double crochet into each of the last 10 stitches. Okay, so that was one double crochet in the last 10 stitches of this row. Okay, so we're finished with row 7. So let's go ahead and chain 2 and turn our work. And then we're going to do a double crochet right into that very first stitch. Now normally when you start your row with a double crochet, you would chain 3 and then you would count the turning chain as your first stitch. But we're not going to count the turning chain as a stitch for this yoke. So that's why I'm just going to chain 2 and then do a double crochet right into that very first stitch of the row. Okay, so for row 8, what we're doing here is, now for row 8 you have a couple of choices. You can do double crochets into every single stitch, and then in the corners you would do a V-stitch. There are 12 stitches here before you get to the corner. In the corner you have the 2 double crochets, and then in the next stitch you have 2 double crochets. So the 2 stitches here in the corner had 2 double crochets each. Now we did not do a chain 1 in between the 2 groups of 2 double crochets. So we're going to be working in between the 2 groups of double crochets. So we're going to be working right in between that stitch, and we're going to do a V-stitch. We're going to do, now sometimes a V-stitch will have a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet, but for this V-stitch we're going to do a double crochet and only 1 chain, and then our second double crochet for the V-stitch. And the reason why is for the yoke, we want to minimize the holes or the gaps in the corners. So that's why we're going to just do a chain 1 for the V-stitches in each of the corners here. So you can go ahead and just do double crochets into every single stitch, work a V-stitch in between the groups of 2 double crochets. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do some front post double crochets in some of the stitches, because I just thought it gave a nice visual interest and a little bit of texture to the yoke. So if you look at the sweater here, you can see where it has this raised ridge right here. That's due to working some front post double crochets as well as regular double crochets. So for this tutorial, I'm going to make it just like I did this one. Instead of doing all double crochets into the stitches, I'm going to work, some of the stitches will have double crochets and some of them will have the front post double crochets. That way you can get that nice little texture. So that's why I wanted to just go over that with you. If you did not want to have that raised ridge, then you could just go ahead and do double crochets in each of the stitches and just do the V stitches in each of the corner. And I'm going to be working the V stitches in each of the corners, so you'll be able to see how to do that if you want to make that change. Okay, so there's 12 stitches before you get to this corner stitch where we're going to work the V-stitch. We already did 1, so we need to do 11 more stitches. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first stitch we did a double crochet. We're going to do a regular double crochet into the next stitch. So into the second stitch of this row 8, we'll also have a regular double crochet. And then into the next 2 stitches, we're going to work a front post double crochet. So we're just going to work 1 front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So to do that, you do a yarn over, insert your hook behind the post instead of inserting your hook into the stitch. So we're just going to insert our hook behind the post of the double crochet from the previous row, yarn over, pull that loop underneath that post. You will then have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So you can see that it's just like the same thing you do with a double crochet. It's just a matter of where you insert your hook. Instead of inserting it into the top of the stitch, you insert it behind the post for the front post double crochet, and then you just work the double crochet as you normally would, where you do yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So that part is the same. It's just a matter of where you insert your hook to work the stitch. If you're not familiar with the front post double crochet, or you haven't worked with the front post double crochet very often, I do have a tutorial that shows you how to do the front post double crochet. The tutorial also goes over how to do the back post double crochet. So if you want to view that video first and then come back to finish this row 8. So I'll leave an iCard in the corner that you can click on that will bring you directly to that tutorial. And I will also leave a link in the description box below that will also bring you directly to that tutorial for the front post double crochet. Okay, so we just did a front post double crochet around that stitch. We're going to do another front post double crochet around the next stitch. So you're going to do yarn over, insert your hook behind the next post, and then yarn over, pull the loop underneath, and then you have your 3 loops just like you would with a normal double crochet, and then you just do yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. So you just complete it just like you would a regular double crochet. It's just a matter of where we inserted the hook to begin the stitch. So you can see the last 2 stitches had 1 front post double crochet each. The very next stitch, we're just going to work a regular double crochet. So we're just going to insert the hook like you normally would right into the top of the stitch, not around the post, and do a double crochet. And then we're going to do a front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches. That was the one, and then another front post double crochet into the next one. Okay, so you can see the first 2 stitches are regular double crochet. The next 2 stitches, a front post double crochet, and then the next stitch was 1 regular double crochet, and then 2 front post double crochets. The next stitch, we're going to do 1 double crochet, and then we're going to work a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. There's one, and the second one. Okay, so you can see the corner starts off with 1 double crochet into the first 2 stitches, but then we do 2 front post double crochets in a single double crochet, and then 2 front posts in a single. So you can see there's 1 regular double crochet in between the 2, this part. Okay, and now you can see there's 2 more double crochets to work before we get to the corner. So if you look at the corner from the previous row, in row 7, remember we did 2 double crochets, and then into the next stitch we also did 2 double crochets. So in between those 2 groups of 2 double crochets, that is where we're going to insert our hook to do that V stitch for the corner. Okay, so let's go ahead and do 1 double crochet, 1 regular double crochet into the next 2 stitches. Okay, so we're going to do a double crochet here, and then a double crochet into the next stitch, and then here's that corner stitch right in between the 2 groups of double crochets. I'm going to work a V stitch there, so I'm going to do a double crochet, insert my hook in between those 2 groups of 2 double crochets. So that's a double crochet, and then I'm going to chain 1. Instead of chaining 2, I'm just going to chain 1 because we do want to eliminate having, a lot of gaps or holes in the corners of the yoke, and that will minimize it. If you put 2, then the gap will look a little bit bigger and the hole will look a little big here, and we don't want that. So that's why I'm just putting 1. And then after the chain 1, we're going to put a second double crochet right into that space in between the double crochets. So there's your V stitch in the corner. Now and then you'll see your next corner where you have the 2 double crochets and then the second group of double crochets. Now you can put a stitch marker right there before you continue if you want, and I think I'll do that. Okay, so I have my stitch marker. To make it easier, I think it would be easier if we find the corner first where we're going to work the V stitch. That way you can just continue along and not worry about where to find it when you get there. So just find where you did 2 double crochets, and then that second group of double crochets, and then that space right in between, just insert your stitch marker there, and that is where we're going to do that V stitch. Okay, and then into the next 2 stitches, we're going to go ahead and do 1 regular double crochet into those 2 stitches. Okay, and then we're going to do a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. There's the first one and the second one. And then 1 regular double crochet into the next stitch, and then a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches, and then 1 regular double crochet, and then one front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So there's the first front post double crochet and the second. And then the next stitch we'll have 1 regular double crochet, and then 1 front post double crochet into the next, and 1 front post double crochet into the next one. So we just did a regular double crochet, and then the next 2 stitches had a front post double crochet. So that's what it's looking like so far. And we're not going to actually use this side as the right side of the yoke. We're going to turn it over, and now you can see where that ridge is. So this is going to be the front side of our work. So I just thought it made a nice little ridge and detail here. So that's why I'm doing that. But like I said, if you don't want to work front post double crochets at all, you can definitely do just a row of regular double crochets. Okay, and then into the next stitch we're going to do 1 double crochet, and then we're going to work 1 front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So this one will have a front post double crochet and then a front post double crochet around the next one. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet into the next one. Okay, so we just did a regular double crochet. So around the next 2 stitches we're going to do a front post double crochet. Okay, so there's my 2 stitches with the front post double crochet, and I just wanted to mention, in case I forgot to mention, from this corner to this corner there are 24 stitches to work. Okay, so I just did my front post double crochets into those 2 stitches, so the next one will have 1 regular double crochet, and then we're going to work a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to work 1 regular double crochet into the next 2 stitches before the corner. So we're just going to do 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and now we're here to where that stitch marker is. So into that space we're going to do our V-stitch, which is 1 double crochet, chain 1, and 1 double crochet all into that same space where the stitch marker is. So let me go ahead and take that one out. Okay, so let me go ahead and do double crochet, chain 1, double crochet right back into that same space, and that's, like I said, in between the 2 double crochets from the previous row. So there's your 2 double crochets and your second set of 2 double crochets. So right in that corner is where I did the V-stitch. Okay, and then now we're going to work on the back part of the sweater. This is where the back is for the yoke. So we'll do the same thing we just did here. We'll make it easier on ourselves and put a stitch marker in before we begin working our stitches. That way we can find the corner really easy once we get there. So you see where we have, once again, the 2 groups of 2 double crochets that we did in the corner for row 7. So find that, and then right in the middle, right in the center, you'll insert your stitch marker into that space. And that's your corner where you'll work the V-stitch. So now we can just continue working our stitches until we get to the stitch marker where we'll do our V-stitch. Okay, so now we're ready to work along the back of the yoke. We're going to work these stitches here, and we're going to work our regular and front post double crochets, and I'll show you which stitches to do those into. And this is the back. That's if you fold the yoke over. This is the front, and this is going to be the back. Okay, so now we just did the corner stitch. We did the V-stitch in the corner. Now before this corner we did 2 regular double crochets, then the V-stitch, but here we're going to do 3 because we have, the back has 26 stitches instead of 24. So at the back we have 1 extra stitch. So we're going to actually do, so at the back of the yoke there's 26 stitches instead of 24 like the sides. So that's why we're just going to do 3 regular double crochets. So that's why we're going to do 1 regular double crochet into the next 3 stitches. And of course we'll do the same thing over here when we get to the next corner. So here's the V-stitch, and then the next 3 stitches will have 1 double crochet each. And then we're going to do a front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And then 1 regular double crochet into the next. and then a front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then 1 regular double crochet into the next stitch, and then we're going to do a front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches. There's 1 and my second front post double crochet, and then the next stitch will have 1 regular double crochet, and then the next 2 stitches a front post double crochet into each of those 2 stitches there, and then a regular double crochet into the next. And I'm not really skipping ahead in this row 8, that way you can follow along with each stitch. So I'm going to show you every single stitch. We're not going to skip ahead, since this is a little bit different than just doing, you know, straight double crochets across. That's why I want to show you every single stitch for this row 8. Now, we did a regular double crochet into that one, so the next 2 stitches will have the front post double crochet. And then a regular double crochet into the next stitch. And then we're going to do 1 front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. That's the first one. And the second front post double crochet. That's what it looks like so far. We just did a front post double crochet in the last 2 stitches, so the next one will have 1 regular double crochet, and then a front post double crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then you can see right here where that stitch marker is, we have 3 more stitches before we work our V-stitch in the corner. And remember, we started off with the 3 double crochets after the V-stitch, so we want it to be, you know, the same for the back portion here. What we did in this corner for the back, we want to do the same thing here, which is, you know, slightly different from the side because we did 2, and we're going to come back here. When we come back around to this side, we want to do the same thing we did here, so we're going to do 2 right here, but I'll show you that when we get there. So basically you just want to do the same thing in each corner for the back, and you want the sides to be the same. So I'll show you that when we get there. Okay, so we're going to do 1 regular double crochet in the next 3 stitches. And here's the stitch marker, and we're going to work our V-stitch into that space where the stitch marker is. So let's go ahead and do our double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet right back into that same space. And that is in between the 2 groups of double crochets from row 7. So there's the V-stitch. So we just finished working along the back. Now we're ready to work on this side. Before we do that, let's go ahead and find our last corner because we're almost done. We're more than halfway done with this row 8 now. So find the next corner, same thing like we did before. You find where we have the 2 groups of 2 double crochets, which is what we did in the corner for row 7. The first 2 double crochets and the second group. So right in the middle, we're going to insert our stitch marker. So right in the center of those 2 groups of 2 double crochets. That's where we're going to do the V-stitch. So remember, before we came around this corner, we did 2 double crochets before the V-stitch, so we want to do 2 double crochets, 2 regular double crochets after the V-stitch to match what we did on this side. Okay, so we just did 1 double crochet in the first 2 double crochets after the V-stitch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then a regular double crochet into the next stitch, and then 1 front post double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and then we're going to work a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So here's my first front post double crochet and my second one. And then the next stitch, 1 regular double crochet. And then the next 2 stitches, you probably guessed, just like we've been doing, we're going to do 1 front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. And you probably already guessed the next stitch will have 1 regular double crochet. And then we're going to do one front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. And then into this next stitch, 1 regular double crochet. And then a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So this one has a front post double crochet, and the next one is also a front post double crochet. And then we'll work 1 regular double crochet into the next stitch. And then the next 2 stitches will have a front post double crochet. So that's the first front post double crochet and my second one. So I just did 2 stitches that had a front post double crochet, and now before the stitch marker we have 2 stitches left to work, and those will be regular double crochets just like we did over here in this corner. So we're going to do a double crochet into the next 2 stitches. Just a regular double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And now we're here to where the stitch marker is. So into that space we're going to work our V-stitch, which is 1 double crochet, chain 1, and another double crochet right into that space, and there's your V-stitch. And okay, so we just did the V-stitch, so now into the next 2 stitches we're going to do 1 regular double crochet each. So 2 double crochets after the V-stitch, and then into the next 2 stitches we're going to work a front post double crochet. That's 1 and 2. And then into the next stitch 1 regular double crochet. And then the next 2 stitches we'll do a front post double crochet. And then the next stitch 1 regular double crochet. And then these next 2 stitches we'll do a front post double crochet. Okay, so the last 2 stitches we did a front post double crochet in each of those. Now we have 2 stitches left for this row. So in the last 2 stitches we're going to do 1 double crochet each, just like we did in the first. Just like we started off with 2 double crochets before we did the front post, so we want it to be the same that we did over here in that corner. Now that chain 2, that was the churning chain, we're not counting that as a stitch, so we're not going to work into that top chain. So that is the last stitch of row 8. So that completes row 8 now. So if you look at the side where we did the front post double crochets, this is not the right side of the yoke. We're actually going to use the other side, and it creates this nice little ridge here, which I thought just gave a nice little detail and texture to the yoke. So that's how that's going to look there. So I think it looks really nice. And then you can see we started off with the single crochets, and then we did the half double crochets, and you can see that little bit of a difference on that line there that gives it a nice little detail as well. So that is row 8. So we have 1 more row to work to finish the yoke. And row 9 is going to be real simple. It's going to be a row of regular double crochets, and we'll work V-stitches into the corner. So where the chain 1 space is for the V-stitch, that's where we're going to do another V-stitch in every single corner for this row 9. Now, to begin row 9, first we'll need to chain 2 and turn our work. In that chain 2, the turning chain will not count as the first double crochet. So we're going to go ahead and do a double crochet into that very first stitch. And then before I continue, I'm going to go ahead and just place my stitch marker in. So find the V-stitch in the corner, and then right in the chain 1 space, put your stitch marker there, and that's where we'll do our first V-stitch for the first corner. Okay, so we already did 1 double crochet, so we need 12 more. So just 1 regular double crochet in every single stitch until you get to that corner where we have the stitch marker. So this round 9 is an easy round. It's just 1 double crochet in every single stitch and working V-stitches into the corners. Okay, so before you get to the stitch marker, you should have 13 double crochets now. And then we're going to do a V-stitch where this stitch marker is. So I'm going to do my double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet right back into that chain 1 space. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet into every single stitch here. So I'm going to go ahead and find my corner again. So there's my V-stitch. I'm going to insert the stitch marker into that chain 1 space. That's the chain 1 space of the V-stitch from row 8. So then you just work 1 double crochet into the top of each stitch until you get to that corner stitch marker. And we have 26 stitches to work here, so we'll have 26 double crochets in between the 2 V-stitches for the corners. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 1 double crochet each. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 1 double crochet into the next 26 stitches. Okay, so I just worked my double crochets in the last 26 stitches from that last V-stitch. Now I'm here where the stitch marker is, so I'm going to do my V-stitch into that corner stitch where the stitch marker is. So that is the same as before. 1 double crochet, chain 1, and 1 double crochet right back into that corner space. Okay, so now along the back we have 28 stitches to work. So we're going to do 1 double crochet into the next 28 stitches. So let's go ahead and place our stitch marker, same way before. Find the corner where you did the V-stitch from the previous row and put your stitch marker into that chain 1 space of the V-stitch. Okay, so now we just do 1 double crochet into the next 28 stitches until we get to that stitch marker. Six, 27, 28. Okay, so I just did 1 double crochet in the last 28 stitches, and now I'm here to where the stitch marker is, so I'm going to work my V-stitch right in that corner, that chain 1 space where the stitch marker is. Okay, so we'll do 1 double crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet right back into that same chain 1 space, and there's my V-stitch. So now I'm here along the side, and there's 26 stitches to work before the next corner. So I'm going to find my corner again. Here's the V-stitch from row 8. I'm going to place my stitch marker into that chain 1 space of the V-stitch. And then I'm going to work 1 double crochet into the next 26 stitches until I get to my stitch marker. $25, $26. Alright, so I just did 1 double crochet into the last 26 stitches, and now we're here to where the stitch marker is in the corner. So let's go ahead and do our V-stitch into that space. So that's double crochet, chain 1, and 1 double crochet right back into that same chain 1 space of the V-stitch from the previous row 8. And you should have 13 stitches remaining. So now we're just going to do 1 double crochet in the last 13 stitches of this row 9. Okay, and here's the last stitch. And remember that chain 2 that we did does not count as a stitch, so we're not going to work into that top chain. This is the last one, so you should have 13 double crochets after this V-stitch in the corner. Now we are finished with row 9, and we have finished the yoke portion of our sweater. So the yoke only takes 9 rows to complete. So remember, we're not using this side where we did the front post double crochets as the right side. We're going to use the other side, so you have that nice little ridge that is on the other side of the work that the front post double crochets created. So I think it looks really, really nice. So then you just fold it like that, and that is your yoke. Okay, so that completes the yoke in part 1 of the tutorial. In part 2, we'll do the body of the sweater, and then after that one, you'll have part 3, which will have the sleeves of the cardigan, and then for part 4, that's going to be where we're going to do the trim and add the buttons for the cardigan. So after I upload all of the parts for the cardigan, I will then show you how to make the little booties that match the cardigan. And then I'll show you how to make the matching hat. Hope that you enjoyed watching the tutorial today. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and like the video. And please don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell. That way you'll get a notification when I upload the next parts of the cardigan sweater and of course the little booties and matching hat. So I want to thank you for watching today and have a great day.